Hello, everyone. I'm Nina Gopal. Welcome to Global Express, where we discuss developments in our backyard and our immediate neighborhood. This week, we're revisiting the so called ceding of the island of Katchatheevu to Sri Lanka in 1974 that Prime Minister Modi has raised after it was brought to his attention by the BJP's rising star in Tamil Nadu, the BJP chief K. Annamalai. So Katchatheevu, to those of you who haven't heard of it, is an island measuring 1.6 kilometers, apparently, by 300 meters. It lies north of Rameswaram, southwest of Delft Island. It's uninhabited, and it's now being called a hot button issue. It does seem to have been brought up, I believe, to score points against the Congress and the DMK in the local elections, but could it have wider ramifications? So let's look at what the Prime Minister has said. He has charged that the Indira Gandhi government had ceded the island in the Park Straits to Sri Lanka in 1974. He's called it the Congress's historic failure to protect the country's territorial integrity. He's also said that the island was an integral part of India, but Indira Gandhi gave it to Sri Lanka. And he said that even if Indian fishermen go there by mistake, they get arrested and they get jailed. Talking to us today are three eminent experts on India-Sri Lanka relations. Let me start with you, Ambassador Palihakara. He served as Sri Lanka's permanent representative to the UN. That was at the height of the fighting in the final months of the civil war. He's also served as governor of the northern province in 2015. Good to have you with us on the show, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Let me also welcome Ambassador Ashok Kant. He has served as India's ambassador to China and Sri Lanka. He's a former director of the Institute of Chinese Studies and distinguished fellow with the Vivekananda International Foundation. Welcome, Ambassador Kant.
Thank you.
And last but not least, one of India's most well-known and perceptive journalists, Nirupama Subramanian. In print media for over 36 years, she's worked with India's top newspapers, spent years in Sri Lanka and Pakistan, written 2 books, I didn't know that, and is now co-founder of Awaz South Asia, an online web platform. Welcome, Nirupama. She's written a very well-researched piece on Katchatheevu and has a very interesting angle on the issue, which we will get to in a bit. But I'm going to pose the first question to you, Ambassador Palihakara, as he has only limited time with us. Let me ask you to explain. Now, you have Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister Ali Sabry, who has, after Prime Minister Modi flagged the issue, he's basically said that it's not an issue. And he doesn't think that this issue will ever come up. He's also denied that there's any possibility of a change in the status of the island. So could you take us through the original 74-76 agreement and the fact that Sirimava Bandaranaike and Indira Gandhi, both very, very forward-looking prime ministers, actually came to an agreement after for this whole thing being held on ice since 1921. Pre-colonial India and pre-colonial, Sri Lanka. Would you like to tell us something about what it actually entails, what the agreement actually entails?
I disclaim any particular expertise on these specific agreements, but as a diplomat of Sri Lanka and as somebody who has worked very closely with a number of distinguished colleagues from the Indian side, including the 2 friends you have on the panel today, I have some familiarity with it. I think the 2 agreement, the substance of that, you have, I think, basically described, so I won't repeat that. Basically, the 2 agreements represent how bilateral diplomacy between a giant country and a small country living with such proximity, with such complicated and complex issues involved, how the bilateral diplomacy has worked in the best interest of both countries by reaching compromises, consensus, where the interests converge. I think I don't want to add or qualify what the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Honorable Foreign Minister of India, or our own minister had said. But I do want to say that when my basic point is that these two agreement represent I think the very valuable pieces of negotiations and consensual decision making uh, to exploit in a mutually reciprocative way, exploit our resources. As you rightly mentioned, these two agreements, in a way, I would say, go together in a sense. Katchatheevu, uh, it was decided by both countries that it is in Sri Lankan sovereign domain. And then subsequently in 1976, it was agreed that the Wages Bank, they are in the Indian domain. I mean,
Yeah, this is the bed. This actually was the most interesting point in Nirupama's piece on the
yes,
subject. So
yes,
that
yes,
that that was actually quite interesting. But
yes.
the delimitation line, which we
Maritime
talk about
boundary
along
line, yeah,
the maritime, the median line,
yeah.
it why did Sri Lanka at that point wanted Katchatheevu to be included in its sort of territory, so to speak. Would you explain why that is so? Why did Sri Lanka want that?
Well, the maritime boundary line was, I believe, Nirupama can correct me, having been in the Jurassic part of retirement for 12 years now, my memory is a bit
Yeah.
rusty. The maritime boundary line was following 76, and
Yes.
the country was achieved 74. So by that time, naturally, any negotiating party would want to see what is already within your sovereign domain is within your maritime boundary line. I mean, it goes without saying. But what is important? What is important is that all diplomatic negotiations entail some give and take. You don't
Yeah.
achieve perfect happiness for either party. You have
Yes.
managed dissatisfaction in both parties. That is the essence of a consensus and a compromise. And I think a big country and a small country has done well to create this kind of thing. The important thing here is that we should not unravel that now.
Yes. That's the point, actually.
So
Yes. True.
we must keep it going. We must
So
keep it.
you don't think it's going to lead to a diplomatic spat, Ambassador? I mean,
Sorry,
is it
could you repeat
because
that?
it was never? No, I said that. Do you believe that this conversation, that I mean, the
Yes.
fact that Mr. Modi brought it up,
Yeah.
and Prime Minister Modi brought it up, and then Ali Sabri has now said that it's not an
Yeah.
issue. So
Yeah.
you don't see a diplomatic spat brewing as we have one with the
Mm.
Maldives.
Yeah.
You don't see that happening.
Let me put it this way, to be fair. When the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Foreign Minister of India, when they made those comments, a lot of eyebrows went up here.
Yes.
Not necessarily among policymakers but among analysts, think tankers, the media, and the uh, people, politicians preparing for elections. We also have a round of elections coming up, so a lot of
Yeah.
eyebrows went up here. But I think Sri Lanka has so far, the government, the policy making community has so far handled it with a measure of equanimity that the issue
Yeah.
deserves, and I think we should keep it that way. And I have not seen on the part of the Indian foreign minister or the prime minister uh, any further comments going beyond what they said. Everyone understands that this is election time. And in elections, there are compulsions driving the certain utterances. And so there is sometimes political leaders will have to say things that will appeal to their voters. But but when it stops there, I think that is something that people can live with. But if it becomes government policy, then that's a different story altogether. I don't think that we will come to that.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
it's a complicated way of answering your question, but I don't
No,
think
no.
I have, I have no reason to believe that it will lead to a diplomatic spat of the kind that you
Yeah,
described.
I agree. But
I
I
think
mean,
that
there
both
are few
countries are
comments.
mature enough to see that it doesn't happen that way.
You're right. And then, I mean, there are comments, I mean, pretty sharp comments. You're right. I mean, the Sri Lanka's daily Financial Times has said that provocative claims on Sri Lankan territory would force our country to seek security guarantees elsewhere. That's definitely a nod to China, for sure. Uh, Ambassador Kant, if I can come to you, senior diplomats like yourself, you've served in Sri Lanka, you've warned very specifically against opening up, the issue. I mean, we have our former National Security Advisor Shiv Shankar Menon also saying that it could be a self goal. So, do you think it was prudent on the part of our Foreign Minister Mr. Jaishankar and the Union Minister Hardeep Puri, both of whom are senior retired diplomats who you must have worked with, to imply that the agreement should be revisited? Would that not open up a whole host of other border disputes? I mean, we've just settled a long-standing dispute with Bangladesh, which you know a lot about, and the maritime boundary, which was arbitrated by the UN, the Convention on the Law on the Sea, and we have China sitting on the LAC right now, and we've created these buffer zones where which is basically China encroaching on our territory, as we've discussed in the past, Ambassador. So tell us, I mean, in Pakistan, we've got multiple disputes which are all on hold. There's Nepal, there's Bhutan, there's Myanmar. Are we in danger if you raise this one issue with on Katchatheevu? Will all kinds of other fronts open up?
Well, Lina, I will not like to venture into commenting on what the Minister of External Affairs or Prime Minister have said,
I
or what
understand completely.
the Minister Hardeep Puri has said. But I would like to reiterate what Ambassador Palihakara just mentioned, that though, some comments have been made on Katchatheevu agreement, as Foreign Minister Ali Sabry also mentioned yesterday, this is more to sort of ascribe responsibility for so-called ceding of Katchatheevu to Sri Lanka, but no suggestion has been made that you'd like to reopen the issue. Now, let me, if you permit, I would like to step back a little bit
Yeah.
and look at the rubric of agreements which were put in place in 1974 and 76, because we tend to focus on one agreement of June 1974, which was boundary in historic waters between India and Sri Lanka and related matters. Now, Katchatheevu, as you know, two countries had different positions, and we agreed that it falls on the Sri Lankan side of maritime boundary. At that time, concept of international maritime boundary line had not come. That came with the UNCLOS subsequently. So we agreed to that, but it provided a basis for several very important follow-up agreements, including one on maritime boundary in Bay of Bengal, in Gulf of Banar, then as Ambassador Palihakara mentioned, the Wadge Bank, which is a much larger area and rather well endowed in terms of resources, was put on the Indian side. Though there was a transitional arrangement, we had to provide, a few things to Sri Lanka, then Ceylon for 5 years. Equally important, we could agree on the maritime trijunction boundary involving India, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. All that was completed in 1976. Now, there are some implications which are not paid enough attention to. One, that it resolved an old standing dispute between India and Sri Lanka, and to some extent also involving Maldives, because you could agree on transaction point, which provided much greater clarity on utilization of resources, marine resources, fishing rights, exploitation, hydrocarbon resources, and other rights, which was very important, and provided durable basis for developing very friendly relations between India and Sri Lanka. So it was a strategic, move which was made, and on the whole, it was quite balanced. In fact, if you look at even national interest of India, because as my Sri Lankan colleague pointed out, Wadge Bank was put on Indian side of the boundary. Another aspect which is often underlooked, that the agreement of June 1974 is on boundary in historic waters between India and
Yes.
Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
The concept historic waters was still relevant at that time. And UNCLOS, it has sort of faded away. By agreeing on boundary between India and Sri Lanka through these multiple agreements in 1974 and 76, we managed to ensure that there was no sort of empty area which could become international waters. That was a real possibility if these agreements had not predated UNCLOS. So on the whole, in fact, I would suggest that these one of June 1974 has served both countries very well. And even though it has been an emotive issue in India, especially Katchatheevu, it has been raised, as you know, in Tamil Nadu. There have been unanimous resolutions in the State Assembly of Tamil Nadu. It has been taken to Honorable Supreme Court, where still sub judice.
Twice.
Yeah,
Yes.
but so far, Government of India has maintained a very consistent position, under which we have never agreed that there was any ceding territory to Ceylon or Sri Lanka, because it was still an area which was under discussion. And we have also not suggested at any point of time that we want to reopen understandings reached in 1974 and 76. Any move towards reopening will be entirely counterproductive. There I entirely agree with my friend Ambassador Palihakara that so far Sri Lankan reaction at the official level has been very measured. You'd have seen Foreign Minister Ali Sabry's statement of yesterday. In media, there have been some comments which is not unexpected, but I don't
There have
think
been pretty biting editorials on the issue in Sri Lanka.
But I don't think it is, as things stand, going to be a major dampener or roadblock in developing of India-Sri Lanka relations. But we should not take it beyond rhetoric to any change in government policy.
Yeah. If I can come to you, Nirupama, would you tell us whether you agree with both the ambassadors? Because the piece that you've written is you've mocked at the whole idea of even reopening this, saying that would that mean that we have to return this piece of land in China? Could you tell us something about what you think about it?
So I completely agree with both Ambassador Palihakara and Ambassador Kant that it's a long settled issue. I think this year is the 50th anniversary of the first agreement of June 1974. So it's completely it would go against the grain of every diplomatic sense that we have of our relationship with Sri Lanka to reopen this. And I also think that both Prime Minister Modi and External Affairs Minister Jaishankar know this. Therefore, their rhetoric was only to the extent of trying to say that, this was ceded by Congress and in collusion with DMK. So basically in a sense, to fix political rivals and opponents in Tamil Nadu state.
So
So to
will
that
that have an
extent, they've been.
impact in Tamil Nadu? Will it have an impact in Tamil Nadu at all?
No, I can't claim to have spoken to fishermen about this, but my sense of the matter is, and over the years, the sense is that the fishermen are not really bothered about where Katchatheevu lies, in whose hands Katchatheevu is. I think what they want resolved is the fact that that they should be allowed to fish without the constraint of this maritime boundary, because fish doesn't know boundaries. There's a better catch on the other side. They want some mechanism by which they can share the marine resources of that sea of Pork Strait, and how to go about this. And this has been the focus of discussions. I recall that in 2011, 2012, when these discussions were at their height, there was even a theory that, and I think it was tried out also, that fishermen from both sides should actually meet and develop their own mechanisms. Of course, it's another matter that it hasn't come to fruition, but I think that would be the best way forward. And that is what I think fishermen on both sides want. They're both Tamil. There was immense support from the fishermen of Tamil Nadu for the Tamils in northern Sri Lanka during the civil war. So in a sense, this whole fishing dispute divides these two, in effect, one linguistic community across the two sides.
Good point.
Puts them at loggerheads with each other, which I think they don't want, because they're very friendly. When they meet I've been to one of those the festival on Katchatheevu, the Feast of Saint Anthony. I've been there. They're very amicable towards each other, and I don't think they want this issue to divide the two sides. There are intermarriages, there are kins people, because they essentially they have all these linkages.
But the difference is, Nirupama, basically about the fact that the Indian fishermen are bottom trawling. That is the problem, isn't it?
So the problem is really, the problem is of bad practices on the Indian side. On the Sri Lankan side, because of the war, the war went on for such a long time, the Sri Lankan Navy had restricted the fishermen in northern Sri Lanka from putting out to sea beyond, say, I don't know, I can't remember now, 50 meters, 100 meters, very little. Right. And they could hardly, there was no catch. So fishing was completely at a dead halt there. And once the war ended, and even during the ceasefire in 2002, from 2002 to 2007, when these restrictions were removed, there was a sudden sense of freedom, and that we could go out and that they could go out and fish. And suddenly they realized that this is not as easy as it sounds, because from the Indian side, I have spoken to fishermen who say that, well, when you see them at night in their boats with their flaming torches and all that, it looks like an entire village is marching on the water towards you.
Wow.
So it looks frightening, and it is frightening in a sense, because these, as you rightly pointed out, they use bottom trawlers, which basically, as the name suggests, they destroy the ocean bed, the seabed, and everything comes up in the net: small fish, big fish, flora, fauna, everything. And then they also rip through the nets that the Sri Lankan fishermen have put out on their side. So
what you're saying basically is that there is a point of contention between the two sides, and the BJP could tap into that kind of well of resentment that is there about the fact that nobody has done anything to address their problems.
But
You
nor is
know,
the
to
BJP, because if you recall, Prime Minister went to Sri Lanka, Prime Minister Modi went to Sri Lanka in 2015, where he
yes,
made a very statesman-like remark, saying this is a very complex issue. It involves livelihoods on both sides, and we have to find a solution. We have to sit down together and find a solution. But what has the government done in 10
that's
years
a
to find a
360
solution to this?
degree turn from what he said in 2015 to what he's saying today.
Sorry, I didn't get your question. Did you? Did the?
No, I said it's a 360-degree turn from what he
Yeah.
said in 2015 to now, because Hardeep Puri has also said something very interesting. He said in the case of Katchatheevu, it's only give, and there is no take. So I mean, I want to know what the take is. What is the take?
No, so
Yeah, tell
sorry.
me.
So the take, as my friends here, Ambassador Palyakara and Ambassador Kant, have pointed out, is that I mean, it wasn't an exact exchange. We didn't get territory in return, but we did get exclusive rights on Wadge Bank. Plus,
That's it. Yes.
we also ensured that that portion of the sea was not open for any adventurism by a third party. And we also, the POC Straits were divided into exclusive economic zone, the POC Strait, Gulf of Mannar, and the extension downward was divided between the two sides. So you kind of ensured that there is no fishing in troubled waters, to use a cliche. Plus, please remember that in 1974 June, that same month, we concluded the citizenship. I mean, we concluded a pact towards resolving the citizenship issue of Indian origin Tamils who were disenfranchised by the Sri Lankan, the first Sri Lankan government of independent Sri Lanka in 1948. That was a big thing, and that was the main thing that was bedeviling relations at that point between the two countries. Because from Nehru onwards, the government of India was agitated about this issue, about how can somebody be just rendered stateless when you have lived there for 4 or 5 generations, and how can this issue be resolved amicably? And Nehru was under pressure for that, saying, well, what are you doing about our citizens there? And Nehru's whole thing was, yes, they are Indian, but they ought to be recognized as citizens by that country because they left this country long back. They may have some relationships here, kin here, but everything for them is there now. And this ought to be recognized by the Sri Lankan side. There's a hell of a lot of correspondence on this between Nehru and the states and the states of India, chief ministers of India, and even between Nehru and Indira Gandhi. Gopal Krishna Gandhi has written a good book on this, detailing all this correspondence, called Nehru and Sri Lanka. It's all there. And to say that we got nothing in return is just to raise an emotional pitch, which I don't think has much of a resonance in India. For instance,
that's what I wanted to know. So there is no resonance.
If you now say, okay, let's take back Katchatheevu. Okay, I mean, I'm just saying it's a hell of a big can of worms, but let's say we do that. You can't do that because this is a treaty between two sovereign countries, and it is bound by the Vienna Convention of International Treaties, and there's no exit clause in this. If a unilateral exit clause is not there, how are you going to persuade Sri Lanka to come on board this? Okay, even if Sri Lanka wants to do it, it's a very long process, it's complicated, and it immediately brings India into disrepute as a country that does not respect agreements that are signed by previous governments. And I was reading something very interesting a couple of days ago, in which Shastri has a press conference after the Sirima Shastri Pact on this entire citizenship issue. And somebody in the Indian press asks a question, and Kamaraj is sitting by his side saying, what if a future Sri Lankan government does not respect this agreement? This is another agreement, Srima Shastri Pact on the statelessness issue. And Kamaraj intervenes before Shastri answers. Kamaraj intervenes to say, don't even put that idea into your newspapers, because this is an agreement between two democratic countries, and we expect that a future government in India will respect it. All future governments in India will respect it, and we expect the same from every future government in Sri Lanka. So this was a spirit in which India then approached these treaties, right? I'm not talking here about the 1974 agreement, talking about the one that was concluded during Shastri's time in 1965, 66.
That's very interesting.
This
Can we
is
go
the
to
spirit.
Ambassador Palekara, because I just wanted to ask you. You brought up the Wadge Bank, and it's something that Nirupama has written about very beautifully. So India's sovereignty over that is not going to change at all. Is there any conversation about that? I mean, why is that what this whole thing is about? I mean, do you think that's the item of interest rather than the fisherman's issue? I mean, I'd like all of your points of view on it.
Okay. First specific point you asked. Frankly, on the Sri Lanka side, I have never seen, and I don't see it even today. It's an issue about the Wage Bank is an issue to be resolved. As far as we are concerned, it's a done thing. It's a
done deal.
It's a done thing, and that it is in neither country's interest to even reopen it for discussion, let alone unraveling it, because
Ambassador, Wadge Bank is also become far more interesting now, because you say there's an undersea oil and gas reserve, which is obviously going to be eyed by by India. India will not obviously would like to have oil and gas and mineral deposits explored in the coming future, don't you think?
Frankly, then we go into the realm of speculation here, which I don't think would be very helpful here. But I do want to make a comment on what Nirupama was saying. The spirit of bilateral cooperation and negotiation. And I think, once again, to say that living next to a big country is a complex business in any situation. But we have been handling very complicated, very sensitive, very emotive issues, including the Sirima Shastri Pact. And we have been doing that in a consensual way, if I recall correct. When Mrs. Bandaranaike signed that agreement, before she did that, she did telephone the opposition leader, Mr. Dudley Senanayake at that time, the UNP, and said that we are going to sign this. Do you have no? Oh, madam, we have had bipartisan consultation on it. There was a bipartisan consent. In fact, he said that you sign, come back, I will propose ratification in Parliament as the leader of the opposition. So that is the spirit in which, so there was never a question of trying to renegotiate or when you make consensus, the last thing one should do is to try to reinterpret it again, because you can't do that. That will unravel it, and it is not in the interest. So I don't think that question arises. One more point before, very briefly. certainly the problems will arise, very complicated and very grave consequences will arise if either country, either India or Sri Lanka, seriously considers making these kinds of public statements their public policy. Then you get into very serious difficulty. And also, it's not good for Indian diplomacy either. I must be very frank, because
Yeah,
India's rise is recognized worldwide. But India's rise should be seen as a rules-based power rising, not a power
muscular
that,
diplomacy.
not a power that considers not a power that considered rule of force as against the force of rule.
That's
Uh,
a beautiful point. Yes.
yeah, so it's very important that what we have concluded with difficult negotiations should be preserved for India's projection. I mean, I don't want to give unsolicited comments here, but I think it's important for us to remember that even when the biggest, most powerful democracy in the world withdrew from certain agreements under Trump presidency, there was widespread, concerns and some condemnation, whether it relates to environment or arms control and so forth. So I think it's very important to preserve that point, that it's the force of rule, not the rule of force, that should be seen, the diplomacy. Everyone understands that there are domestic compulsions for making these statements,
Yes,
especially
yes,
during
yes. But
election
when we
time.
cross the line, when we
And
cross the line from domestic into foreign policy,
yeah.
and you
But
blur
the
those lines,
most important remaining thing in Indo Sri Lanka bilateral relations right now is the fishery issue.
yeah,
It's regrettable that both sides. When I was governing the north, I remember we had a special delegation in India. Actually, Dr.
okay,
Jaishankar was the foreign secretary then. And then
uh-huh.
fishermen's consultations were held, moratorium on bottom trawling was proposed, and then international assistance was sought. Sri Lanka recognized India has a big problem because it's a huge political issue in Tamil Nadu. Where should
Mm,
these fishermen, Tamil Nadu fishermen, go and fish? Uh,
mm, mm.
so for this deep sea fishing international, so none of these things worked really. This issue has to be addressed and resolved. Otherwise, it's going to be a point of irritant. It can develop into even a bigger issue. So we need to
That's a
address.
good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Ambassador Kant, if you can just come in and tell us about, what you feel the future should be. I mean, in the sense, should we pursue this? In the sense, should we bring it up with Sri Lanka, or should we just let it pass?
Well, Nirupma, let me, I mean, in response to your question, let me also briefly comment on what Ambassador Palihakara and Nirupma said. On Ambassador's point about India being a country which follows a rule-based order, I think our track record has been very clear on this issue. I'll give you two examples here. One relating to agreements of 1974 and 76 with Sri Lanka. As ambassador is aware, it has been a very emotive issue in India. When this agreement was signed in June 1974, there was a debate in Parliament, and Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, then a member of Parliament, spoke very eloquently and forcefully against the agreement. But later, when he became Prime Minister, during his 2 terms as Prime Minister, this issue was never reopened. So
Yeah,
we understand sensitivity of the issue, but at the same time, cutting across party lines Government of India's position has been very consistent, that its issue has been settled with Sri Lanka. The Katchatheevu falls on the Sri Lankan side of the international maritime boundary, and that we are not, this is not a question of ceding territory. This has been the response given by both UPA government and the current NDA government in filings before Honorable Supreme Court, where this matter is sub judice. Second example I'll give, which in fact reinforces our position that we have been a very responsible international player. As you're aware, in July 2014, Permanent Court of Arbitration gave its award on maritime boundaries and maritime zones between India and Bangladesh, which largely went in favor of Bangladesh.
That's right.
But we accepted it. We accepted it. The present government accepted it. Our behavior was very different from that of China in 2016, when on the issue of the Philippines taking the matter of South China Sea before the same Permanent Court of Arbitration, the award went in favor of the Philippines, and China rejected it. Not only rejected it, but just continued to completely disregard the agreement, undermine it, and change facts to the ground. So that itself shows how India and China have very different trajectories as responsible or irresponsible international players. Coming to issue of fishing rights raised by both Ambassador and Nirupma. First point, we should get out the way that Katchatheevu is not a very important factor for quite some time. When I was in Sri Lanka, we used to check that, how many fishermen are detained near Katchatheevu. And not many fishermen were actually detained because not many fishing resources are left in that area. At that time, Indian fishermen were coming deep inside the Sri Lankan waters. Nirupma has referred to the period. When I went there, I was told that fish in those waters die of old age rather than being fished. I mean, that was the joke. So I think moving ahead, one, we have to recognize that as clarified in the Supplemental Agreement of 1976, India doesn't have any fishing rights on the Sri Lankan side of maritime boundary, as Sri Lanka doesn't have any fishing rights on our side. That is the position. At the same time, it's a humanitarian issue. It's a livelihood issue. So we have argued that let's have a transitional arrangement whereby we should find alternative livelihood for fishermen on both sides. And frankly, that doesn't lie in fishing in coastal waters, which are getting depleted very rapidly. So we need to have wherewithal capacity building on both sides for deep sea fishing. And India should play a large role. Government of India should step in and help fishermen both on our side as well as on the Sri Lankan side. I think that's the real solution.
That's a great point.
And you made the point that when I was High Commissioner there, in fact, fishermen on two sides had more or less agreed on a transitional arrangement whereby Indian fishermen will continue to do fishing in a limited way in Sri Lankan waters as long as they didn't take recourse to bottom trawling, but we'll move towards longer term arrangement where such trans-boundary fishing will not be encouraged. I think that's the
Ambassador Kant, isn't it also a very strategic area? I mean, you have Delft Island where the Chinese, maritime vessels, spy vessels, so to speak, have been docking, and India does get a little rattled when that happens.
It may be strategic, but I have full confidence that our Sri Lankan friends will always bear in mind our security interests, especially when it comes to areas so close to our coastline, whether it will be Delft or Katchatheevu. I don't see any likelihood of any of those areas being allowed to be misused by any country which doesn't have our interest
At heart, yes,
at
yes.
heart. So,
Nirupama, I can come back to you. The most interesting part of the piece that you wrote was about how Modi has invited bids for oil and gas exploration in Wadge Bank, and you've said it's triggered worries among the fishermen around Vilnius. So, is that really what the focus is? Is that a gold mine there that India's waiting to tap, but afraid also that it will upset the fishermen, the fishing community.
So I don't think there's a gold mine under those waters in terms of hydrocarbons or
Oil and gas.
oil and gas, but there may be mineral deposits. There was a remark at that time, which I read in the Times of India report on the RTI information obtained by Mr. Annamalai, that then the then Foreign Secretary told the DMK Chief Minister, Mr. Karunanidhi, that I mean, one of the things that he said about why India was signing that agreement was that there's oil, the traces of oil have been found. No, but they did not mention exactly where. But I think the reference then was to Wadge Bank. They haven't found anything so far, and they have they have invited expressions of interest for exploration in 3 blocks of that of Wadge Bank area. I'm not sure what there is, and whether they'll find anything. It could be minerals, it could be anything. But the real issue now there is that it has become a big source of livelihood, that area, which is supposed to be a very rich and very rich area of biodiversity for marine resources, and it is this new move by the government to start exploration in the area is panicking fishermen in that area, saying, well, you've already done Virinium, and there's all this heavy traffic which has already disturbed the area quite a bit, and now you're saying 3 blocks in that area, which means fishing won't be allowed in that area. So it is worrying fishermen and civil society groups, and I've seen statements by very many people saying, do not do this, because that area is a biodiverse area of biodiversity, and we should not disturb it. So the issue seems to have really changed for India over there and for the local people. So the local people have grown stakes in that area, and they don't want it disturbed. And I just want to
That's
make
very interesting.
Yeah, I just want to make a point about how this is playing out on the other side, which is that as both ambassadors have pointed out, there's the reaction from the government, the official reaction has been extremely mature and very forward-looking, and both sides recognize that this is political rhetoric, and you should go this far and perhaps no further. But what it does is that it creates a kind of resentment at the level of the people who don't understand that it's rhetoric. It may not become policy. All that is not understood, and it opens a door for anybody to use for anybody in Sri Lanka to use it in their elections to whip up resentment. So they also, as Ambassador Palekara pointed out, they have 2 elections coming up. One is the presidential, one is the parliamentary, and they will be hard-fought elections. It won't be, nobody's going to just give anybody else a walkover. And one of the front runners in that election is the JVP. So, so we can see all kinds of permutations and combinations coming up to
That's right.
this kind of rhetoric.
So I'm running out of time. So if I can just turn to every one of you to make your concluding remarks. Master Palekara, can we start with you?
Yeah, I want to tag onto what Nirupama said last. I think both countries' interest will be served by preserving these agreements, not undermining or unraveling them. point one. Point two, this even if this has no policy impact later, it creates completely unnecessary and unhelpful situations which can be used and misused by various parties doing campaigning, and in both countries or in other countries, and especially for Sri Lanka, that is a difficult time, because even for recovery from the economic crisis, we need consensual governance, consensual decisions. So these things come and create very unhelpful a vortex of instability and speculation. What will happen next? And India's attitude towards Sri Lanka will be projected in a
Negative.
very poor light, and
Yeah.
especially considering what is happening around us in South Asia, India having certain, I don't want to describe those, but having problems with in the neighborhood. And finally, it is not good for India's own policy
Yes.
projections, because India naturally has a claim, and rightly so, as a rising power with robust growth and with leadership in diplomacy. But I don't know how these kinds of utterances could help build that. So I'll
Yeah.
stop. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Ambassador Khan, would you like to jump in here?
Yeah, Nina, no, as a former negotiator or diplomat, I would like to say that in the ideal world, domestic politics shouldn't intrude into our foreign affairs agenda. But we know that in the real world, that's not the case. So domestic politics and rhetoric will create occasional turbulence in pursuit of a foreign affairs agenda. But we need to know where to stop. Katchatheevu has been an emotive issue, so it's not for the first time it's being raised. It does have certain resonance in Tamil Nadu in particular. But at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, Government of India has maintained a very consistent, sensible policy on this issue in the past, including the present government. And I believe that will continue because any questioning of these agreements not only create misgivings in bilateral relations and create space, as Nirupama mentioned, for India baiters, and there's no dearth of those people, but also for negotiators. It puts them in a very awkward position that you do something in good faith, and subsequently, if that is challenged as giving up national interests, it becomes a very sort of dangerous ground to traverse.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Nirupama, you've got 5 seconds.
Yeah.
No.
So just one thing, okay, because you've given me just 5 seconds. As a journalist, I'm very, very interested that this whole information was obtained by Mr. Annamalai through RTI, because the government of India has so far never given any information to RTI queries on on matters pertaining to India's relations with foreign countries. So I'm very happy to learn that they have actually started giving out this kind of information, and I hope that they will entertain queries not just by BJP presidents of a particular state or or other BJP leaders, but also from journalists who have in the past asked questions, given applications for India's relations with Myanmar, with Nepal, with Pakistan, with Afghanistan. So we'd like to see the government actually provide information to all those queries also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting point to close this discussion on. Thank you very much, Ambassador Palikara. Thank you very much, Ambassador Khan. And thank you, Nirupama, for coming in on the show and giving us your wonderful invites. Thank you, viewers. Do click on the Global Express icon, New Indian Express, and share the clip.